Given that the distance from the North Pole to the equator is 10,000 kilometers, assuming the Earth to be a perfect sphere, what is its volume reported at 3 sig figs in meters cubed? It says here, note that historically this distance once defined what a kilometer is, but no longer does today. I'm also going to note the Earth is actually not a perfect sphere, and that is well known today and has been for at least some number of hundreds of years. Um, but we're going to assume that it is to simplify things here. So, wow, how do you do this one? Well, let's see. We're talking about the Earth here, right? So hopefully everyone kind of gets the story here. I'm going to attempt to draw a circle here, roughly a circle. I'm not always perfect at circles on this thing. To try to understand this, because like if I'm thinking like if this looks like a cross section of the Earth, and maybe like if this is like the North Pole, maybe I'll just put a little N here for the North Pole or something like that. And if this is like if the equator is kind of running halfway through right there, right? And I guess that would be like the South Pole. I'm talking about geographic south though, so we're not talking about magnetism, no geomagnetism here at the moment. But that means the distance from here to here, that would be that 10,000 kilometers that we're told about there. But I think that suggests, to me at least, a circumference C of 4 times that, right? Because this is just a quarter of the way around the circle. So I'm going to look at this and say, hey, that means a circumference of 40,000 kilometers for a circular kind of cross section of the Earth. But since circumference is equal to 2 pi r, this could let me find the radius of the Earth in this way, which you could also maybe Google the radius of the Earth, but that kind of be cheating. I mean, turns out it may not exactly match either because this question is not exactly meant to be totally accurate. It's close, but we have to not like look up numbers for this because we're not assuming that those numbers are potentially valid here. In that sense, I think r here, if I divide both sides by 2 pi, I would get 40,000 kilometers divided by 2 pi, which I'm going to go ahead and put those numbers into my calculator, and I wind up getting, let's see, 6,366. Maybe I'll go one more. I like to avoid round off error, so I usually keep maybe 1 or 2 more sig figs than I think I'm going to need. But maybe this is good enough just to round off because it's actually like 0.1977, etc. But I think I just round that to 6366.2 to give me a radius. And then since I'm asked for volume, and it says we're going to have it reported at 3 sig figs in meter cube. Let's see, this was 1, 2, 3, 4. This was 5, so I've got 2 more than I need. That's usually good, in my opinion, to have 2 more than you need if you round off at some intermediate result. But the formula I'd like to use to find volume is going to be the formula for volume of a sphere, which is 4/3 pi r cubed. So in other words, I'm going to want to put into my calculator 4/3 pi times, now let's see, I got a couple options here, I guess. I think I'm going to stick in kilometers for right now. I could have switched units on the fly, I suppose. But I'm just going to say I'm putting that in kilometers and cubing it. Put that into my calculator, and it gives me like 1.08. There's my 3 sig figs, but it's got a power of 10 on that. It says E12, which you might know is interpreted. I've seen some people in recent years start to write like E12 on their paper, but that's really, in my opinion, not proper form when you do scientific notation. I mean, the calculator and other calculating devices will sometimes summarize it that way, but really it should be properly written as a power of 10 times 10 to the 12. But this is still in kilometers cubed. Now there's 1,000 meters in a kilometer, so maybe what I'd like to do is multiply this by a conversion factor of 1,000 meters per kilometer, but then I've got kilometers cubed, so I'm actually going to have to cube that whole thing, which means I'm going to multiply by 1,000 cubed, which that's like multiplying by 10 to the 9. So I'm going to have to add 9 to this power of 10 at the end of the day, or I can just have my calculator do that for me. Any way you like, it's fine. But that gives me 1.08 times 10 to the 21 meters cubed. And I do want to mention that if you, a tempting way to check the answer on this is to Google the volume of the Earth. I'm not sure if it exactly matches that number because this was based on a kind of historical model. And if you Google that today, you're going to get something more accurate than the historical model that this was based on. So just be aware, if you Google that, you might not get a perfect match. But there it looks like we do get a match with the answer, and it says there, note that also that this number is close but not entirely accurate due to the limitations of our model. And specifically, I'm meaning the historical assumption of 10,000 kilometers being at that time the exact definition of the kilometer for the distance between the equator and the pole, which is no longer exactly the case today.